He spent 30 years playing the man who never flinches, the one who walks into a burning building, a gunfight, a car chase, and comes out the other side without breaking a sweat. But away from the cameras, Jason Statham has spent almost as long guarding something far more fragile than his on-screen reputation. A real, private, unglamorous love story that took over 15 years to finally come into focus. This is the story of how one of Hollywood's toughest men found the one relationship he refused to let the public in on, and what finally made him open up. Jason Statham was born on July 26, 1967, in Shirebrook, a small mining town in Derbyshire, England. His father worked market stalls and sang in lounges. His mother was a dancer. Long before acting entered the picture, Statham's real ambition was the Olympics. He trained for years as a competitive diver, eventually representing England at the 1990 Commonwealth Games in Auckland and competing at the World Championships in 1992, according to his official biography referenced widely across entertainment outlets and confirmed by Wikipedia. He never made it to the Olympic Games himself, but that discipline, waking up before dawn, training through injury, competing on nerve alone, became the foundation for everything that came after. When the diving career stalled, modeling paid the bills. Statham worked campaigns for brands like French Connection, and it was through that world that he crossed paths with director Guy Ritchie, who was casting his debut film and needed someone who could believably sell counterfeit goods on a London street corner. Statham, who had actually worked market stalls as a teenager, didn't need to act much for the audition. The result was Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels in 1998, followed by Snatch in 2000, both box office hits that turned an unknown into one of Britain's most bankable new faces. From there, the trajectory is well documented. The Transporter franchise beginning in 2002, Crank in 2006, The Bank Job and Death Race in 2008, The Expendables starting in 2010, and a long run as Deckard Shaw in the Fast and Furious franchise beginning in 2013. By 2017, Statham's films had grossed more than £1.1 billion worldwide, cementing him as one of the industry's most reliable action stars, per Wikipedia's account of his career. He's remained just as busy in recent years, headlining The Meg in 2018, The Beekeeper in 2024, and A Working Man in 2025. What's notable about that run isn't just its length, it's how consistent the persona has stayed. Statham built an entire career on being the same reliable, no-nonsense presence, film after film, decade after decade, in an industry that usually demands reinvention. Off-screen, though, the pattern has been almost the opposite. Constant change, quiet upheaval, and, until fairly recently, a string of relationships that rarely lasted, and rarely made it past a few years of tabloid speculation before ending. But it's the quieter parts of his life, the parts he almost never discusses in interviews, that fans have spent 2 decades trying to piece together. Long before Hollywood, an 18-year-old model named Kelly Brook met a 30-year-old Statham, and the two began dating in the late 1990s. According to multiple accounts, including reporting from LA Bible and Hello magazine, the pair were together from roughly 1997 to 2004, and at one point were engaged. Brook made real sacrifices for the relationship. She had a steady, successful job hosting a daily program for MTV, and she gave it up to move to America and support Statham as his film career took off. Speaking on Elizabeth Day's How to Fail podcast in November 2025, Brook reflected candidly on those years, describing elements of codependency in the relationship and explaining that she put her own career on hold while Statham's accelerated. She recalled having a strong job at MTV that she stepped away from to follow him. The relationship ultimately fell apart under the weight of that imbalance. Brook has said she began to feel deeply neglected as Statham's fame grew, eventually admitting she fell out of love with him entirely. On the same podcast, she described one especially blunt exchange from the breakup, recalling Statham asking her why she'd choose to leave at the exact moment he'd become a successful, wealthy movie star. Looking back on it now, Brook has called walking away one of the best decisions of her life, even though, at the time, it was reportedly one of the hardest. No children came from those 7 years. Brook went on to become one of the most photographed models in Britain, was named FHM's sexiest woman in the world in 2005, and eventually married French-Italian model Jeremy Parisi in 2022. Statham, for his part, rarely brings up the relationship publicly, which has always been his general pattern with anything personal. A brief relationship with Australian actress and singer Sophie Monk followed in 2005, but it lasted only a few months and drew little attention. Then, starting in September 2006, Statham entered a much longer relationship with Israeli actress Alex Zosman. According to Parade's reporting on his relationship history, the two were together for roughly 4 years, from 2006 to 2010, though very little detail about that relationship was ever made public. It ended quietly in early 2010, without any public explanation, a pattern that, in hindsight, may have been Statham rehearsing for the far bigger, far more private relationship that was about to begin. In 2009, at a party in London, Statham was introduced to a 22-year-old British model named Rosie Huntington-Whiteley. She had grown up on a family farm in Plymouth, Devon, and by the time they met, she was already an established face for Victoria's Secret and Burberry. The two began seeing each other shortly after meeting, though according to Hello Magazine's account of their relationship, they kept things largely private in the early stages. Their timelines soon overlapped professionally. Huntington-Whiteley landed a role in Transformers, Dark of the Moon, her big screen debut, and began filming just a few weeks after auditioning, putting her and Statham in overlapping industry circles during 2010. They didn't make their relationship public with a red carpet appearance until February 2011 at the Vanity Fair Oscar party, followed by an appearance together at the Met Gala that same year. From the outside, it looked like the start of a fairly typical Hollywood romance. In practice, it developed slowly and was kept almost entirely out of the tabloids for years at a time, a sharp contrast to the media attention that had surrounded Statham's relationship with Brooke a decade earlier. Huntington-Whiteley has occasionally offered small glimpses into what drew her to Statham. In a 2013 interview with Glamour, when asked directly about their roughly 20-year age gap, she said his knowledge and strength were part of what she found attractive, and that having someone at home who believed in her mattered more than the difference in their ages. It's one of the few times she's spoken publicly and specifically about the dynamic between them, and it points to something the couple has repeated in various forms over the years, that the relationship isn't built around Statham's action star image, but around a much more ordinary sense of partnership. After roughly 5 years together, Statham proposed, and the two got engaged in January 2016. The news became public the way a lot of quiet celebrity milestones do, not through an announcement, but through a photograph. At the Golden Globe Awards that January, photographers spotted a diamond ring on Huntington-Whiteley's finger, according to Parade's account of the relationship, and outlets quickly confirmed the engagement. They have never rushed toward an actual wedding, and Huntington-Whiteley has addressed that directly more than once. In a 2018 interview with Extra, she said they'd been so focused on their work, and then their son Jack came along, and that they definitely talked about getting married but were looking forward to doing it when Jack was old enough to be part of it. That explanation, work, then a baby, then simply not being in a hurry, has held up consistently across nearly a decade of speculation. As recently as 2026, in a cover interview with Vogue Australia, Huntington-Whiteley gave a rare update on their life together, describing a recent home renovation project in London and noting, with some humor, that Statham found the process a nightmare while she loved it. It's a small, mundane detail, but it's also one of the clearest signs that a decade and a half in, the relationship is still built on the same kind of ordinary, domestic footing it apparently started with. Huntington-Whiteley announced her first pregnancy in February 2017 with an Instagram post, and their son, Jack Oscar Statham, was born that June, weighing 8 pounds 8 ounces. Statham became a father for the first time at 49 years old. A second child followed several years later. In August 2021, the couple announced they were expecting again, and their daughter, Isabella James Statham, was born in February 2022. Shortly before Isabella's birth, after more than a decade based in Los Angeles, the family relocated to London. Huntington-Whiteley later told the Sunday Times that she and Statham wanted their children educated in England, a decision she described as one of the most important calls a parent can make. Since then, the family has kept a remarkably low public profile for two people with that level of fame. Photos of Jack and Isabella rarely surface, and when Huntington-Whiteley does post family content, it tends to be sparing and carefully chosen. Vacation snapshots, the occasional birthday tribute, rarely anything more. That instinct toward privacy, which shaped the relationship from its earliest days, now extends fully to their children. Part of what makes this relationship different from Statham's earlier ones is that neither partner has had to put their career on hold for the other, a dynamic Kelly Brook has said was central to what eventually broke down her relationship with Statham decades earlier. Huntington-Whiteley's career didn't stall after she and Statham got together. If anything, it kept expanding well beyond modeling. Alongside her Victoria's Secret and Burberry campaigns, she took on film roles in Mad Max, Fury Road, and continued modeling for major fashion houses well into her 30s. More recently, she's built a business of her own, a beauty and skincare brand called Rose Inc., which grew from a digital content platform into a full retail line carried by major beauty retailers. It's the kind of parallel track success that simply wasn't part of the picture during Statham's relationship with Brook, when one partner's rising fame came directly at the expense of the other's. That balance seems to matter to both of them. In her comments to Extra in 2018, Huntington-Whiteley was careful to frame their slow approach to marriage not as reluctance, but as two people who were genuinely consumed by their respective work for a long stretch of years. His films, her modeling and business ventures, rather than any sign of instability in the relationship itself. Statham, for his part, hasn't slowed down either. Between 2018 and 2025 alone he starred in The Meg, Hobbs and Shaw, Wrath of Man, Operation Fortune, The Beekeeper, and A Working Man, keeping up a release schedule that would be demanding for an actor half his age. Fatherhood, by most public accounts, hasn't changed his work ethic so much as it's changed what he does with the time in between projects, reportedly waking early for parenting duties even on nights before demanding filming schedules, according to Huntington-Whiteley's own comments to Extra in the years following Jack's birth. A relationship kept this quiet for this long was always going to attract speculation, and there have been a few recurring rumors worth addressing directly. The most persistent one is that Statham and Huntington-Whiteley secretly married years ago, fueled largely by paparazzi photos of Statham wearing a ring in public. Neither has ever confirmed a wedding, and both continue to be referred to publicly, including in their own interviews, as engaged rather than married. As of the most recent reporting in 2026, nearly a decade after the engagement, they still haven't formalized things, and Huntington-Whiteley's own comments suggest that's simply never been the priority for either of them. A second rumor suggests the couple's 20-year age gap has caused friction. The public record doesn't really support that. If anything, Huntington-Whiteley has repeatedly framed the age difference as a positive. In both her 2013 Glamour interview and later comments, she's pointed to Statham's steadiness and life experience as something she values rather than something that creates distance between them. It's worth noting how unusual that consistency is. Age gap relationships in Hollywood tend to draw outsized scrutiny, and pairings with a similar gap have often become tabloid fodder precisely because one partner is painted as unstable or the arrangement as unsustainable. Statham and Huntington-Whiteley's relationship has mostly avoided that narrative, in large part because neither of them has given the press much to work with. No public arguments, no leaked disputes, nothing beyond the occasional, carefully worded interview answer. A third and older rumor tries to paint the earlier relationship with Kelly Brook as a scandal that somehow shadows Statham's current relationship. The documented reality, based on Brook's own account, is much simpler and far less dramatic. Two people in their 20s whose careers pulled in opposite directions, until the imbalance became too much for one of them to sustain. Brook has said plainly that she doesn't regret the relationship, and that walking away from it ultimately allowed her to grow into her own career and identity separate from his. Statham himself almost never discusses his relationship with Huntington-Whiteley in detail. That's consistent with how he's approached his personal life throughout his career. Guarded, understated, allergic to the kind of tabloid narrative that followed his relationship with Brook in the early 2000s. What's changed gradually isn't Statham opening up so much as the sheer weight of time. More than 15 years together. 2 children. A shared home in London. A body of public evidence, however limited, that adds up to something considerably more durable than anything else in his personal history. Huntington-Whiteley has been somewhat more willing to speak about it, in her own careful way. She's described the connection between them as immediate from the very start. She's talked about being drawn to a version of Statham that has little to do with his on-screen persona, someone shaped, in her telling, by years of ordinary work, market stalls, odd jobs, the same kind of grounded background she grew up around on her family's farm in Devon. And on at least one occasion, in a public post shared with millions of followers, she's referred to him as the love of her life, not through a formal interview or a scripted announcement, but the way people actually say those things, briefly, sincerely, without much explanation attached. That's really the through line of this entire story. Nothing about Statham and Huntington-Whiteley's relationship has played out the way most Hollywood romances do. No dramatic public declarations, no reality show-style access, no carefully managed media rollout. What's replaced all of that is 15-plus years of consistency. The same partner, the same slow pace, the same insistence on keeping their children and their home life almost entirely out of view. For an actor whose entire career has been built on speed, danger, and spectacle, the most significant relationship of his life turned out to be the one built on almost none of those things. It's slower. It's quieter. It's happened mostly behind closed doors, in a Georgian townhouse in London rather than on a red carpet. And by every available account, from Statham's own rare comments to Huntington-Whiteley's occasional, unguarded remarks, it's also the one that stuck. At 58, with a filmography that's grossed well over $1 billion and a reputation built on never backing down, Jason Statham's Real story may not be about any fight he's ever won on screen. It may simply be about the one relationship he decided, quietly and deliberately, was worth protecting from everything else. Sources referenced: Wikipedia, Jason Statham, Rosie Huntington-Whiteley, Kelly Brook, Hello! Magazine, Parade, LA Bible, The Express Tribune, How to Fail with Elizabeth Day Podcast, November 2025, Glamour, 2013, Extra, 2018, Vogue Australia, 2026.